Welcome to the Amash Files, your one-stop podcast for Justin Amash's march to the presidency, featuring deep dives into who Justin Amash is, campaign analysis from experts, and news from the campaign trail. If you're ready, let's get started. Hey everyone, this is Eric here with Libertarian podcaster Marc Clair. He's the podcast founder, host, and producer of The Lions of Liberty. After being inspired by the 2008 presidential campaign of Ron Paul, because, who wasn't, Marc co-founded the Lions of Liberty brand and website with three of his fellow Penn State alumni, hence the Lions part of the Lions of Liberty. That website soon evolved from opinion pieces and daily news articles into the Lions of Liberty podcast, which he founded in 2013. Over the last 7 years now, Lions of Liberty has become a leading platform for libertarian voices in the alternative media. Marc, thanks so much for being on the Amash Files.
Eric, it's great to be here. I'm excited to be roaring with you here on the Amash Files.
Absolutely. We're thrilled. I mean, this is actually the big week, of course. This is something that kind of waiting for, Justin announcing his presidential run. He announced, and he's got the exploratory committee because he doesn't officially have a nomination. What has been your reaction, I guess, and what's been your impression with his launch and, what the libertarian world, the universe?
I think within the libertarian world, it's been kind of a will he, won't he for, I don't know, maybe almost 9 months, I think it's been since he left the GOP. I think even when there were rumblings of him leaving the Republican Party last year, which was when he was interviewed on my program right before he left the Republican Party. I think a lot of libertarians were hoping right then that he would make a really big splash and just immediately jump right over to the Libertarian Party. And then since then, everyone's just kind of been sitting around seeing the occasional tweet that kind of takes shots at both parties and saying, all right, well, he's acting like he's thinking of doing this. Then, of course, at the same time, as you know, there was the congressional campaign, so no one really knew if he was going to just stay on that track as an independent, hop over to the LP. It's just been a giant, I would say, courtship, because there definitely have been many libertarians that see him as someone that can really get the sort of mainstream attention that libertarian, not just the Libertarian Party, but libertarian ideas have been craving so much since those Ron Paul days that you mentioned in my great introduction there. That's what most libertarians thirst for. They're thirsting for someone that can really articulate the ideas and also excite people and get that mainstream attention at the same time. And it's a tricky bag, it's just kind of a tricky mix to come into, because these are many different qualities. You can have the perfect principles, you can have communication ability, you can have the ability to get mainstream media attention. It's hard to find all of those in one person, and I think to many people they do see Justin Amash as being somebody that imbues at least some of those qualities all around.
Yeah, and that was my impression with Justin initially. I mean, when we've been friends for quite a while, but when he was in Congress for a couple of years, and he was working with Ron Paul for initially, and I actually went with him when he visited Ron Paul to get his endorsement. I definitely felt like this is the guy who had the potential to really reignite that sort of liberty movement. The one thing about Ron Paul was interesting. It was totally unplanned and organic. I mean, 2011 was a totally different situation than 2007, 2008 run, where it was just. I'm sure Ron Paul had no idea any of this was going to happen. He'd been talking about ending the Fed and all these sorts of things for years, and suddenly, there are students at the University of Michigan campus that are chanting "End the Fed," which was totally insane. I was in that campus. There's no way I would ever in a million years have imagined that would happen. Right. But Justin is definitely more calculated in the sense that, that sort of movement, the foundation has sort of been laid down. How do you think he just gets that reactivated? I mean, is the nomination sort of all it's going to take, or what do you think he specifically needs to get done?
That's a great question, because there's no secret formula to how you ignite a brushfire like Ron Paul did. It was really a unique set of circumstances and just a unique time. And, it was really when the economic crash was happening just around 2007, 2008. I think as people were seeing that happen around them, it kind of coincided with Ron Paul talking about the Federal Reserve, talking about all the problems with the way government manages money, or if you can call it managing, and all of these things were sort of playing out in real time as Ron Paul was speaking about them. And I think that when you combine that with the fact that he is so charismatic, especially when he's up there on the stage, and every other candidate besides him was saying the same basic things over and over and over. And here's this one guy saying totally different things you didn't even hear in GOP circles. Talk about legalizing drugs in the Republican Party. Are you kidding me? Talk about being anti-war in the Republican Party. Are you kidding me? All of that combined at the same time, and the fact that maybe the mainstream media didn't see any problem putting him on stage at first because, he's just this old crazy guy. He'll go up and talk for a few minutes, no big deal. Little did they know that he would cause so much excitement, and at that point they kind of had to keep him into the debates. So it was such a unique circumstance that I don't know if it can be recreated in that same sense. But I think that so many of the circumstances that led to Ron Paul's popularity and the excitement around his campaign are still remain. People are seeing that we do live in sort of an economy of winners and losers, and it's not very fair. Now, people like Bernie Sanders can capture that same sort of excitement and that same sense of unfairness. But I think that libertarians, especially now that Bernie Sanders' voice is really just kind of shuffled under the DNC carpet now, I think libertarians are really in a position to capture those people that are so disaffected by the entire system. They know something's wrong. They know the Democrats and Republicans are both not looking out for them in any way, shape, or form. And it's just going to take that right mix again to, I don't think we'll ever see a repeat specifically, in the same way that Ron Paul kind of took off. I don't think that's necessarily repeatable, but maybe something even better can happen than that can happen. Maybe a libertarian can win 1, 2, or 3 states, which even in and of itself would be completely unprecedented and in many ways bring legitimacy, if not to the Libertarian Party, but just to these ideas. It would force politicians to have to cater to this, maybe even a silent majority, I might even call it, if not a silent minority. So I don't know how it can happen, but people are waiting for it to happen. There are people that have been waiting 10 years for this to happen all again, for another exciting movement. And there's no doubt that Justin's entry into the race, forming this exploratory committee, it has caused a huge amount of excitement in libertarian circles. Even people that don't think he should be the candidate are excited about the fact that he's entering the race because it's bringing so much mainstream attention to the Libertarian Party. And I think that in and of itself is, he's providing tremendous value just by saying that he wants this nomination alone.
Yeah. You're in the libertarian universe all the time, right? And that's sort of your podcast.
So.
Right. And so you actually have 3 podcasts, Alliance Liberty Network. You have yours. You have Brian McWilliams has Electric Liberty Land, and you have John Odermatt, who has his show on Felony Fridays on Friday. So again, if you've not actually listened to the Alliance of Liberty show, I'd subscribe to that. I listen to that all the time. It's a great podcast. The great thing about it is you
just got one more left in the hat trick, right, Eric? You only got one more show of those to get on before you
right.
get the special Lions Liberty Trophy.
I just got to get Odermatt to get me on. So
you got to go out and commit a crime, man. You got to go commit a felony. Come on.
I'm living in Michigan.
You're a real libertarian.
I have committed quite a few crimes with my governor's new orders, but I won't specify exactly which ones I've committed. So you're obviously immersed in the libertarian politics. You've interviewed libertarians all the time. What has been your sense of how libertarians are reacting to this? I mean, there are people who were invested in this party in the process for quite a while. Justin's just jumping at the end. I mean, he can claim, I think, credibly that he's been a libertarian his whole life, not a party member. He hasn't been running for president since, the fall. But you have the other front runner, Jacob Hornberger. Although he was a libertarian probably for life, he probably purchased that membership at least back when he ran against Harry Brown. He really hasn't been active in the Libertarian Party either since this fall, really.
Right.
So, I mean, everyone's kind of it's sort of hard to know, who's been around the longest. I guess, does it matter? What do you think? What's your sort of feeling with other libertarians that you've spoken to?
Inner Libertarian Party politics is just such a funny thing. And it's really hard to describe because it's so different than regular, what you might call regular party politics, Democrat or Republican Party politics. I'm sure there's inside bickering within those parties too, but I don't know. I don't see it because I'm not in that universe, but on Libertarian Facebook and Libertarian Twitter, I get to see it all the time. So it's really exciting. What's funny about this is Jacob Hornberger, who you mentioned, is pretty much the current front runner. He's won the most straw polls, the most the most conventions that kind of gave them his nod. But when he first entered the campaign, he was seen as, like you said, as the latecomer. He was seen as the guy wait, you're just jumping in now? We've been touring for a year here. I mean, Adam Kokesh has been running for president. I'm not joking. I interviewed him, I believe it was in 2014. It may have been 2015, about this specific campaign. He has been running for president in 2020 for about 5 years. It's been a concerted effort. So to someone like Adam, everyone's a latecomer. You're all jumping in late. The fact is, there's no rules here. There's no rules about who needs to be nominated. We all know Bill Weld came in pretty much the day of the convention to take in the vice president nomination. At the end of the day, the delegates get to decide. And I think this year there has been a concerted effort by a fraction of the party, known as the Mises Caucus specifically, but he certainly has a lot of support outside that specific group that has been pushing for Jacob Hornberger because they have seen him as someone that really articulates the principles of liberty really well. And I think that after, let's see, the last 3 Libertarian Party presidential campaigns, there's been a sour taste in a lot of libertarians' mouths, a sour taste in people that really find the principles so important. They've had candidates that really didn't speak to those principles. They had one thing. They had credibility, much like Justin Amash has. They had credibility. They had credibility of being a governor in the case of Gary Johnson and Bill Weld. They had the credibility of being a congressman in the case of Bob Barr. But what people were disappointed in was when they went on the campaign trail, they weren't really speaking to libertarian issues. And that's why so many people have been pushing for Jacob Hornberger. And I think that's why he's been winning people over, let alone the fact that he's been around the party a long time. This is not a guy that has a ton of enemies. I mean, he's just a very likable, affable guy. He really speaks well to the ideas, and he really has a lot of passion. So I think that's why there's been such a push for him as well. Meanwhile, I think a lot of the audience that Jacob Hornberger is speaking to, I think there is a lot of overlap with the type of people that would consider supporting Justin Amash. I don't really see them as necessarily that separate on principle. Like you said, I mean, Justin Amash was endorsed by Ron Paul when he first ran for Congress, I think back in 2010, I believe.
Yep.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct.
But like you said, he's been a Ron Paul Republican. He described himself as a small L libertarian on my program last year. And he is really someone that can speak to the ideas. He has been often one of the many 1 or 2 no votes in Congress on many issues. Even I think there's been a number of votes last year where he was the only one, even when Rand Paul and Thomas Massie would stick with the GOP and would kind of side with Trump on certain things more. So he's certainly shown his independence. He's certainly shown his ability to get media attention, and he has a history of being very principled. So it's going to be interesting to see how people that have been pushing for Jacob Hornberger because they've been thirsting for a very principled, very articulate candidate respond to the entry of Justin Amash. I think to a lot of the people that have been supporting Hornberger for this whole time, I've really seen hardly any, if at all, animosity towards Justin Amash. What I have seen a little bit of is like, we've been working for Jacob Hornberger for 4 or 5 months. We're so committed to his campaign, and I don't see a lot of those very hardcore Hornberger supporters jumping right off. What they do want to see, what I've seen all around, is that what they do want to see is a competitive contest for this, for the Libertarian Party nomination. They don't want to see Justin Amash or anyone just waltz in and make it seem like they were handed the nomination, like many people felt was the case, at least with Bill Weld's candidacy. Gary Johnson had been campaigning for it, but when Bill Weld walked in 2 weeks and then had that nomination seemingly quote unquote handed to him, he won the vote fair and square by delegates, but that's how a lot of people felt, that he was being pushed upon them. And then he went out and really never spoke to libertarian values at all. That's the kind of thing that people are wary of, and people are kind of worried about happening again and again and again, because it's happened for the last 3 cycles. And I think that maybe the biggest thing going against Justin is simply the fact that he is a former Republican, because that's who everyone has been burned by, are just former Republicans. I do think it's a very different case in the case of Justin Amash, because he is someone who has shown that he does have principles, that he does have a grasp of libertarian of the libertarian philosophy, and can articulate it well. What people are going to want to see is, can he take that knowledge that he have, and will he go out and really push libertarian ideas? Will he really represent the libertarian philosophy in the same hardcore type way that the Jacob Hornberger fans want to see it represented, or even the Adam Kokesh fans want to see it represented? There are so many great candidates that are just out there that are amazing speakers on these ideas, and nobody wants to lose that. Even if they can accept that there's a good chance their favorite candidate might not win this contest, because Justin Amash is a powerhouse in many ways, especially just because he has been a congressman for so long. He has gotten a lot of media attention for his criticism of Trump, for leaving the Republican Party. He brings so much to the table, but I think what people really want to see, even if they can accept right now there's a good chance Justin Amash can just come in and get this nomination, they want to see a competition, and they want to see the ideas be at the forefront. They want to see Justin Amash challenged on ideas. They want to see him articulating the ideas, and that's what he's going to have to do to gain the support of the 1,100 or so delegates, or at least a majority of those delegates that he needs. And it's a tricky balance, because speaking to the American people at large, is possibly a different task, a different challenge than speaking to 1,100 hardcore libertarian activists. I mean, those are very different audiences. So it's going to be interesting to see how he kind of approaches this. If he enters himself into debates with other libertarian candidates. Back in the day, it might look odd if a big-time politician, sort of like Justin Amash, was in a bunch of online debates. However, right now, everyone's in online debates.
Right.
Joe Biden debates from his house. So in a way, coronavirus and this world of COVID has leveled the playing field where everything's online now. So what's the difference? So it's going to be really interesting to see how in the thick of it Justin gets in terms of debating all the other candidates that have been out there campaigning. But I think if people believe that he goes in there and fairly tries to argue for the libertarian philosophy, fairly tries to really win over the delegates, I think he has a good chance of winning those people over. Even if they don't want to vote for him on the first round, there might be so many people that have spent 5 years with Adam Kokesh or spent 6 or 7 months with Jacob Hornberger that aren't just going to bounce over to Justin Amash's campaign. But I do think that if Justin Amash approaches things in the right way and takes that nomination, he can keep the support of those people and keep that ball rolling as opposed to turning them off. And that's going to be, I think, his biggest challenge.
Yeah, I think, unifying the party, as small as it is, but it reflects a larger swath of libertarians nationwide. And so you want to try and maintain the support from all the different sides, right? Whether there are all these factions within every faction. So, I mean, I actually,
right.
I'm part of the Mises Caucus. I've been very enthused by making sure you have libertarians doing libertarian things within the Libertarian Party because they do represent that view. And so I thought that was a great principle. And I think, what Michael Heiss has been doing has been great. And, I just talked to him today. And so I've been very supportive of that. And I think that's a great thing. And so it's a great influence to have within the party. So I want to look beyond, and simply because, this is the Amash Files. And so we're just going to assume he wins the nomination because people are interested. The problem with libertarian candidates generally is obviously they don't get any media attention. Even Gary Johnson had limited attention when he got it. You could say he fumbled it, or he wasn't charismatic enough to really capture the hearts and minds.
I think we just call it he leveled it now.
Oh, geez. Great. What a great guy. I mean, that was a really hilarious tweet. But he missed, and I think he was not a charismatic guy. I mean, he certainly had libertarian instincts, and I think he governed as pretty libertarian-ish, considering for most politicians.
For a governor, I think you could argue Gary Johnson is one of, if not the most libertarian governor that's ever actually served.
Yeah, probably so. And at least within our lifetime. I mean, I don't know if maybe like Calvin Coolidge, was he a president? I don't know. But anyway, the biggest thing is getting exposure. How do you see Justin's ability to get into a debate? Because I think, a lot of us agree that if you have him on stage with two people whose combined age is 150 years, that he's a 40-year-old ethnic or Middle East background, and he looks more American in some ways than the two pieces of white bread that we're going to have.
Right.
He has a potential to really maybe move a lot of people. How do you see his path? I mean, what does he have to do to get to that point? I mean, you're in the media. What does he need to do to get there?
It's going to be very tricky because as we know, the debates are entirely controlled by a quote-unquote private organization. I believe it's called the Committee on Presidential Debates, something to that effect. And it is co-owned by the Republican and Democratic parties. And they're the only organization that hosts debates. I would argue that the Republican and Democratic parties are quasi-private organizations. They're essentially wings of the state. Yeah. And therefore, if they are the co-owners of the Commission on Presidential Debates, that is essentially a quasi-state organization. And if Justin Amash represents a true threat to the state, to state power, why would they want him in there? I don't know. I think it's going to be very, very difficult to find a way in unless he can build up such a momentum of support in the public first, because there is a point where if his polling is just too high, if he's just too popular, they can't justify not having him in the debates. So I think he's going to have to find a way to generate that media attention very quickly and in a very loud way, and really garner support from a large swath of people. Even then, it will be very, very challenging because they're not motivated to have him in the debates. The two-party system protects itself. The only way I can see him getting into the debates is, A, like I just said, if he just is able to garner such an amazing amount of support that to deny him would make the whole system just so obviously a sham. Or if one side or the other thinks it might help the other side. If Joe Biden thinks that Justin Amash might come in and take even 5 points away from Donald Trump, That's more than what swung the election last time. If Donald Trump thinks, I think he even had a tweet about something about, oh, I find Justin Amash an interesting candidate. He said something to that effect. So maybe Donald Trump might think, oh, this guy's kind of like a liberal anti-Trump guy. Maybe he's going to take some votes away from Biden, who's an old senile guy. So maybe I want him in the debates. Those are, I think, the two possibilities, other than perhaps some kind of lawsuit. I know Gary Johnson had a lawsuit that he kind of won one level of, but it didn't guarantee that there would actually be a third candidate in the debates. Either public support or a strategic maneuver by one side or the other. The thing is, if one side thinks it's going to help the other side, it's unlikely the other side is going to have the opposite idea, is my only thing. So those are the two paths that I really see. And I hate to be a pessimist. It's hard for me to see either of them happening, to be honest. I want them to happen. No matter who the nominee is, even if there's not a libertarian candidate, I would kill to see anybody on debate with these guys. I mean, Jesse Ventura said he's considering running for the Green Party nomination. I probably don't agree with him on a lot, although he did used to call himself a libertarian. I have interviewed him as a quote-unquote libertarian at one point. I think it might be hard to call him that while he's in the Green Party, but it would still be exciting. I'd still be excited about it, and I think there is a thirst out there for something else. So if we can just get someone in there, in this case, hopefully Justin Amash, who knows what can happen if someone gets into the debates. Like I said, because Ron Paul squeaked into the debates and they didn't really see much of it, he was able to start a brushfire because he had that national media attention. People actually had eyes on his ideas. So if Justin Amash can do the same thing, somehow find his way into debates and excite people, who knows where it can go? I mean, I'm an optimist. I'm sort of more of a long-term optimist and a short-term pessimist on a lot of these things. And I think it's going to be a very difficult, very challenging task. But it seems like he's up to it, or else he wouldn't be doing this, right?
Yeah, well, and I've doubted him in every campaign he's had, and I've been wrong every single time. So I've decided I'm going to stop doubting him. And like everything in life, the thing that seems impossible is absolutely impossible until it happens, and then it was inevitable, right? I mean, had you talked to anyone before Donald Trump announced he was going to run for the presidency in the Republican primary, there was no way he was going to win, even the nomination, much less the actual presidency, and yet here we are, right? And
he was the joke candidate for so long.
Yeah.
He was, I think, polling at 1% when he first got in, while people like Jeb Bush are polling at 30%. Then he slowly started to come up, slowly started to come up. And part of what happened with Donald Trump, which perhaps this could help Justin Amash if in some way as well. Part of what happened with Donald Trump is that the Clinton campaign and the DNC saw him as the worst candidate. They saw him as the most beatable. That was, in hindsight, a very foolish thing to think. But that is why they did actually push CNN. This is all revealed in the Wikipedia leaks. That they tried to push CNN to promote Donald Trump as the Pied Piper candidate, the guy that would just, be there to be easily defeated by Hillary Clinton. Clearly, that was a miscalculation. But if the media or certain parties think that they could use Justin Amash in the same way, perhaps they might make the same mistake. Perhaps they might give him so much coverage that he actually does get popular. I mean, that's what happened with Trump. He generated a lot of his own media, but CNN would go ahead and put a Trump rally on for 4 hours straight. I mean, they gave him free media, essentially at the direction of the Clinton campaign. So maybe the Biden campaign, maybe even the Trump campaign, maybe CNN, maybe Fox News, maybe they could end up seeing Justin Amash as someone useful under that theory like that, and end up giving him too much attention, too much more than they had previously planned to, and who knows where it can go from there. At some point, these things can become a beast of their own. I mean, Donald Trump certainly became an unstoppable force at some point. The monster became uncontrollable. They tried to create a Frankenstein that they could easily slay, and they really messed up with that one. So who knows? It wouldn't completely shock me for major mainstream media outlets or these major parties to make a calculated mistake like that, because I think it would be a mistake on their part. I'd like to encourage them to give him media time, to give all libertarians media time, but I think to give them too much time might actually result in a little bit of an exciting revolution again.
Yeah, well, I think you can't underestimate the party's ability to make mistakes. I think, the fact that you have the leading candidates, again, are, I think, two incredibly weak candidates. And so it offers an opportunity, and you don't know what can happen. What is your plan for up to the convention? You're running your show, and you've got, a couple different, not networks, but different shows within your broadcast sort of family. What are you guys going to do for the convention? What are you going to do coming up to that? And how are you going to cover, what's going on?
Well, good question, because as we know, the convention itself and what form it takes is completely up in the air right now. Actually, as of the time we're recording this, by 24 hours from now, we will have more of an idea about how that's going to take place. Our original plan was, it was one of our goals on Patreon was to get to a certain level, at which point we would go to the Libertarian National Convention, bring video equipment, audio equipment, really provide coverage, really good coverage of it as best as we could possibly provide. That's still the theoretical plan if somehow this convention still happens in Austin. I kind of don't think it's going to, considering all the hotel rooms were canceled on the events. And it's pretty much not going to happen, that physical convention. So if there is another physical convention somewhere, if it's pushed to June, if it's pushed to July, that's one of the possibilities. We still plan to go to that place and cover it in that way, and try to do interviews on the ground. I did this in 2016 for the Libertarian National Convention in New Orleans. We went there and sort of provided somewhat amateur coverage. We brought some mics. We didn't really know what we were doing. We did some interviews on our iPhones. That was kind of our first toe into the water of covering a major libertarian event like this. So this time we're planning to be a little more prepared and have a lot more, we're going to have a professional videographer with us, professional photographer, and a lot better audio equipment, a lot better ability to stream. So we have a lot of plans on what to do. They're just kind of on hold at the moment because we don't even know if there is going to be a physical convention. The other options are a smaller rump convention where they go and just have a certain amount of delegates meet and change the rules to do something else. That could be very tricky because no matter what, someone's going to feel like the party was taken over by a select group of people. So I think that would be a very bad option. There's also the possibility of a sort of online convention. It's really hard to picture 1,100 delegates on a Zoom call. You can't. Trying to figure things out. I don't know how it's going to work. I really don't. Hopefully we have a physical convention. Hopefully there's just a miracle here in the next month or two. But realistically speaking, that doesn't seem probable. So I'm not even sure how the candidate is going to be decided. Honestly, there's a scenario, even within the bylaws, where it's possible the LNC itself could just pick the candidate. If it does come down to that, I really, really hope that they will at least go through a non-binding voting process, a non-binding digital voting process of delegates through the same exact process, through different rounds of voting where candidates get eliminated until somebody gets 51%. I think it's really important to try to keep the process the same, even if it's not the same quote-unquote legal process, even if we're not really there in convention. These delegates, and I'm a delegate as well, it's important that our vote is counted. It's important that our voice is counted. People have been working really hard in this party, and people just want to make sure their voice is counted, even if they don't get the exact result that they went in wanting. Even if they don't get their favorite candidate, people want to know that it's a fair process and that nothing was shoved down their throats. So I think whatever they come up with, whatever idea the LNC comes up with on how to take care of this, I hope they just keep in mind that it's really going to be problematic if libertarians feel rebuffed. They don't often act they don't often act nicely. So I think if any candidate feels forced down the throats of people, that person might not lose mass support from the American public, but they might lose the hardcore libertarian support that they're really going to need behind them to really push their candidacy.
Yeah, no, I think you have to have a fair process. You have to have one where everyone feels like they had a voice. However you do that, I think people will recognize that most people will recognize that extenuating circumstances, and so you can't get exactly what you want, probably. So, I mean, my hope is that we can all unify at some point behind someone, and they represent the process. I mean, obviously, my hope is Justin Amash, but
right.
Well, Marc Clair, thank you so much for being on the show from Lions of Liberty podcast, and yeah, it's been great, and look forward to listening to your shows and leading up to the convention.
Absolutely, and we'll be keeping an eye on everything. Like I said, I'm hosting a couple libertarian debates next week. I'm going to be speaking to Justin Amash at some point next week, hoping to get him into some of those debates as well. So no matter what, I can say this: Justin Amash's entry into the Libertarian Party race has made it extremely exciting, and that is something everyone across the board agrees on. Even people that are running against him. I think Adam Kokesh made a big statement. Hey, I'm excited he's here. I want to beat him. I'm excited because I want the mainstream media covering when I win. So I don't think there's anybody that's upset that he's in the race. I think everybody's excited about it because no matter what, it's getting more eyes on the Libertarian Party. It's getting more eyes on the Libertarian race. And that's not just good for Justin Amash. It's good for libertarian ideas. It's good for the Libertarian Party. It's good for all the candidates. So I think there's no real downside here. More attention by the American public. Some of my friends know who Justin Amash is and now know he's running for the Libertarian Party when they never thought about any of these other candidates for 1 second. So it's undoubtedly a good thing that he's running. It's just really important that the process plays out in a fair fair way, in a way that people feel like nobody is being shoved down their throats, because that's when whatever candidate, it doesn't matter if it's Justin Amash, Judge Jim Gray, Jacob Hornberger, if they feel any candidate is just hoisted upon them, they will lose a lot of at least that hardcore libertarian support. So I think that's important for Justin and for anybody else.
Yep. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks for listening to the Amash Files. Please subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player and share it with your friends. We'd appreciate it if you left a written and 5-star review too. Send all questions and guest ideas to amashfiles@gmail.com.